What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be talking about the crucial decisions that Japanese developers have been making and will need to make when it comes to Nintendo Switch this upcoming fiscal year and beyond. So as maybe some of you guys know, the upcoming fiscal year is the end here by March. That's when a lot of these developers and publishers kind of put their brain trust together. They start going over their ideas and what they have for the upcoming year, what they've been working on, and what they're going to be planning for the next couple years or the next year. And it's usually a very crucial time in when development projects get planned and what's going on. So obviously, gamers are going to be looking at the sales numbers. Gamers are going to be looking at what's going on, what's been selling, what hasn't been selling. And a lot of times we can kind of see the direction that a lot of these developers and publishers are going to be going with by what they say. Now, Ubisoft just recently came out and talked about how Immortals Fenyx Rising is doing well, on the Switch at least, and that they are the top third-party publisher for the Nintendo Switch. So you know that, hey, they're probably going to have a few different things here and there for the platform in the future. Also, my good friend of the channel, DocTray81, talked about how Ubisoft does have another unannounced AAA third-party type of game for the Nintendo Switch. So I'm kind of giving you guys a little bit of a layout of what's going down. And if you look at the Japanese developers, which will be the focus of this video here, obviously a lot of them are doing very well when it comes to Nintendo Switch. They've been making great sales because the system has been selling well. A lot of the third-party developers in Japan have been selling good on the system and continue to support it. However, there are a number of games that aren't on the system and that developers probably want to get on the system going forward. So the decisions in terms of what they're going to support, the big franchises, those are coming into play right now at this point. If you look at a company like Sega, for example, they've been criticized heavily by myself and by many other people by not supporting the Nintendo Switch more, not supporting multi-platform, not just the Switch, but just multi-platform in general. A lot of games like Sakura Wars, for example, Persona mainline games have been only on PlayStation systems or very rarely go to other platforms outside of other things like, let's say, Persona Q or Persona 5 Strikers. So it looks like they're kind of getting to that point, right? We got Persona 4 Golden on PC via Steam. So I do think that at these meetings that they're going to be at, this is going to be where the blueprint and the plans are laid out, or the continuation of them funding some of these projects on Nintendo Switch going forward. I think that if you're a Japanese developer at this point with 80+ million and with a lot of the manufacturing issues and just the relatively slow start of the PlayStation 5 in Japan and the non-existent fan base of the Xbox in Japan, it really doesn't make too much sense to continue developing full bore onto the PlayStation 5 and not include the Nintendo Switch in those plans, or PlayStation 5 PC and not include Nintendo Switch. Now, we are seeing a number of publishers kind of come onto this when it comes to Switch. Obviously, Capcom has it in gear at this point. We have Monster Hunter Rise that's coming out this year. We also have Monster Hunter Stories 2 that's coming out. We have Ghosts and Goblins that's coming out. So there are a number of games that Capcom has been planning. So their crucial moment for the Nintendo Switch was definitely, I would say, at the beginning. Obviously, they saw the sales kind of boost off and all the different games they were releasing with ports. But I think that definitely by 2017, 2018, they're like, okay, we need to start developing some big heavy hitters here. So I think they did a good job with that. So what are the other major developers out there that are going to be following in that type of train here? Because Capcom's kind of going in more than what we've seen with other publishers, at least at this point. I mean, there's been a number of ports being brought over, but definitely I would like to see more individual games made for the Nintendo Switch itself. Now, we talked about this when it comes to stuff like Shin Megami Tensei 5, for example, and games that are made specifically for the Switch. Monster Hunter, those are made specifically for the Switch that's coming out. But what else could we see? Now, obviously, Square Enix has been a big fan of the Nintendo Switch. They've got a number of titles that they've already released on the platform. So stuff like Bravely Default 2 is coming out very soon here. They had Octopath Traveler Traveler, which is a phenomenal game. They also had Trials of Mana, which was really good. They ported over the Collection of Mana. That was awesome. But what's going to be planned upcoming here for Square Enix? They've continued to say that they want to have retro style games. They also want to reboot franchises on the Nintendo Switch as well. Maybe not have all of their bigger ones, but definitely have some of the games like I talked about before on the platform. But I do think it's time for them to kind of look in some of their back catalog and also bring out more of those games. We got a bunch of Final Fantasy games on the Nintendo Switch, and to be honest, that's one of the great things that I've seen on the platform is Square Enix saying, okay, let's put all these Final Fantasy games out on there. Let's get our back catalog of games on the system, because it will be a big money maker. But I'd like to see them kind of go a little bit more. Maybe the Tomb Raider games, that's been long rumored at this point. Heck, I've been hearing about it for years when it comes to Tomb Raider. Maybe those finally come over to the Nintendo Switch. I don't think it would hurt to bring over some of those Tomb Raider games from like the Tomb Raider reboot, then the Rise of Tomb Raider. The third one they can keep on the other platforms. No, I'm joking. If they want to bring that over, that's cool. But I think the first two rebooted Tomb Raider games would be a phenomenal choice for the Nintendo Switch. They skipped the Wii U, so having them on Switch, I think it would do well if they put together a double pack and at a good price. I think fans would respond to that, and I think that gamers overall have been responding. I mean, we're seeing on Amazon, for example, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, pretty much shooting up the charts. We're looking at Persona 5 Strikers. PlayStation 4 version on Amazon still doing better, obviously, because there's more Persona fans on PlayStation, but the Switch version in terms of new releases isn't far behind. So it's good to see that. You want to see the expansion of what you've had before, because like I've stated before, and I'll say it again, man, Persona is a franchise that should be selling big across multiple platforms. There is no need, unless you're getting paid a lot of money, to keep Persona only on PlayStation. It's not a first party game. There's no need to keep it only on there. Definitely expand, and I think Persona could be a 10 million plus franchise if they play their cards right. Why ignore 80 plus million people? It makes absolutely no sense, and there's no amount of PlayStation Persona fans or anybody that can sit here and tell me that it's a good business decision from a company that's publicly traded, capitalistic, and wants to make as much money as possible to sit there and say, oh, let's not do this if we're not getting paid from someone else. Persona's way too good to keep only on one platform, and as we've seen with Persona 5 Strikers in the reviews, the game is fantastic. Obviously, it's not quite, when it comes to performance, as good on the Switch, but that doesn't mean it should be denied the release on the platform, and people are gonna buy it on there like we're seeing on Amazon. Doesn't need to sell the most. All it needs to do is sell to where it's profitable and it makes sense for them to do it. And with the 80 million install base, with tens of millions of people in the Western territories that like to play Japanese games, heck yeah, they're going to see that. So a lot of these developers have been making these crucial decisions around this time period, and I think we're going to continue seeing that. If you look at the Japanese developers that still haven't put a ton of stuff on the platform, I mean, there isn't too many. There's just certain games missing here and there. A lot of different Japanese developers have been supporting the Switch. Obviously, Falcom is on board. Trails of Cold Steel games, Ys games are finally coming over normally, so I think that makes sense as well. And to be honest, there aren't too many developers left when it comes to the Japanese scene. Switch fans are just missing certain games, but when it comes to the publisher themselves, a lot of them are bringing over the titles. Now, one controversial game that people talked to me about on Twitter and everything was the Demon Slayer game that they announced for the PlayStation 5, they announced for PS4, Xbox series of systems, and PC. There was no Switch version, and that game is being made by the Sony Music Aniplex or something. It's kind of weird. It's like Sony Music, that's the publisher for the game, and it's not quite directly Sony, but it's their branch that's doing it. So did they purposefully do that to not target the Nintendo Switch because it's the Unreal Engine 4 game? They definitely could have done it, and I think that maybe that's the case. I mean, you guys have been wanting me to talk about that, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they just went with, okay, x86 is developed on, but I think that that's obviously a bad mistake to pick if they had to choose in terms of resources, picking the Xbox platform over the Nintendo Switch when Demon Slayer is the absolute hotness right now in Japan. It's a huge franchise, and not going with the Switch with the 18+ million in Japan, 80+ million overall in the world, that just seems like a bad idea. I mean, if you're looking at Xbox, are they known for buying anime games like that? Unless it's Game Pass or something like that where they get it with their subscription, but I'm not so sure about that pick. So these are the type of decisions that I think that some developers are going to have to kind of reverse course on, or at least start planning to say, okay, maybe we'll have a Switch version with this game or that game that hasn't been announced yet. So going forward, it definitely seems like Nintendo Switch is going to get in on some more of these games, which they have been. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what major games, we're talking games that are being planned for the next 2 years or 3 years, what major games are going to be announced when it comes from Japanese developers. Are they going to go in on PlayStation when right now it's very uncertain when people are even going to have their systems and stuff like that? And yes, they'll get their install base. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here and saying that PlayStation isn't going to sell or Xbox isn't going to sell, because they are. But it seems like the install base in terms of the growth of it is definitely not going as well as it could be because of the manufacturing issues. And if you don't have install base, and if you're trying to plan something, you're uncertain on that. So you're like, okay, well, should we? I mean, should we still stick to PlayStation 4, which we've seen some Japanese developers do? Should we just go with Xbox, maybe PC, Steam, like maybe just Switch for right now? So obviously it's an uncertain time, and it's a scary time for some of them because they exactly don't know where things are going to be with the PlayStation and Xbox in a year from now, or a year and a half from now when their game's coming, or 2 years from now, just because of how low the install base is going to be because of the manufacturing issues. So I think it's going to be interesting going forward. So we'll see what happens there. But what I like to see is all the mid-range games like Disgaea and the Trails and all that type of stuff coming over. I love seeing stuff like Bravely Default. I like seeing Persona 5 Strikers. We need to get some of those other mainline ones on there as well. And I think that things are going to be set for the Switch going forward. And of course, Nintendo can transition right into whatever else they're going to do, whether it's a Switch Pro or a new model Nintendo Switch. And then in the next few years or a couple of years, they have their next generation Switch backwards compatible, maybe update some things. So I think that Nintendo's in the best spot that they've been in quite some time. And I'm looking forward to seeing what these developers do, because it's an exciting time for gamers out there. So what are you guys' thoughts on all of this? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all the latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.